listening to the Benedict Challenge podcast, your guide to spiritual intermittent fasting. To learn more and take the challenge, go to unnatural.method.com/Benedict. Hello and welcome to the Benedict Challenge podcast, where I am engaging in conversations about fasting with people from a wide variety of walks of life. Today I'm with my friend Jon Connors, who is the first official person to sign up for the Benedict Challenge. Jon, what made you want to take the Benedict Challenge?
Hey Charlie, thanks for doing this, for putting this on and stuff, and having it be inspired by spirituality, which is a really important piece. I had done a 40-day challenge in the wilderness back in 2016, and did a 600-day calorie diet for 30 days and then 10 days no food. So I came out actually looking like I was in 7th grade, and it looked incredible, I guess. But it shaved many years off my life. But, it's hard to do that back in the reality, in the real world. I've gained about 17 pounds since COVID, not muscular, anything. So being able to go into an aesthetic practice where it's pushed and driven by the love of God and the desire to root out demons was a real great call to action.
So take me back in time, a little more detail on that fast that you did in the wilderness. How long ago was it, and what exactly was your protocol there?
It was June of 2016, and I had finished up a bike ride across the U.S. and was kind of like, in the abyss of not really sure of what to do next in my life. And so I just, I look to the Bible at times as a way for inspiration, not just as the word as something to read, but something to take in and embody. And when Moses was kind of lost at a time, and when Jesus was lost at a time, they went into the wilderness and they went into the desert and they went for 40 days and they got the answer of what to do next. And so I took the same inspiration, and the protocol was to have enough food that I could carry on my back. So I just planned it out based on weight that I could carry, because I was just walking, and then with all my gear and everything. So that was the constraint that led to the 600 calorie limit. And then I thought I'd be like turn into this mystical man of the woods who understood how to forage and fish and do all these things just emergently. And that never happened. So I had a few supplemental meals and pieces that were incorporated. And then the last 10 days were right around the June 21st peak sun time. The goal was just to be really close to water so I didn't have to really move and just absorb natural energy and be inspired by the Holy Spirit within.
This was up in the Humboldt Forest area, or whereabouts?
The Mendocino National Forest, right by Lake Pillsbury.
What's interesting about that is, from my reading, it seems like doing a pure water fast can actually in some ways be easier than eating a small number of calories a day, especially if the calories are in the form of carbohydrates, which sort of keep us in this glucose burning mode. There was a study by Ansel Keys, who incidentally is the same researcher behind the push to demonize saturated fat, and creating basically single-handedly this low-fat dogma that changed the United States nutritional guidelines, playing right into the hands of agricultural interests and grain companies, etc. But that's neither here nor there. The finding of the Keys study was that on a semi-starvation diet, where men were given rations of, I think it was right around 600 to 1,000 calories a day, maybe it was 1,200, but below their nutritional requirements. They were constantly cold, they were low energy, they were allowed to chew gum, and so they would chew sometimes 12 to 20 packs of gum a day. But when you go a certain amount of time without eating anything, if you have a little bit of fat on your body, then you start to tap into that, and your body undergoes a transition within, depending on how fat adapted you are to begin with, that is, how much your body is used to using either dietary fat or its own stores of body fat as energy. You can get there within 16 to 36 hours to this state of ketosis where you are not feeling the same degree of hunger that you might in the early phase of a fast. What was your experience of hunger, both in the initial part of the fast and then in those last 10 days?
Great question. So at the initial part, the early stage was harder, and actually probably at my rations, all in all, were probably 600 calories a day. For the 30 days, I probably ate more than that the first days because it wasn't enough, quote unquote. And maybe we had a little bit extra fat. So maybe it was around 1,000 calories a day for the first 25, 600 for the last 5, and then 10 without. I had an experience where I got caught up with some bad actors in the woods that were, growing marijuana, and that thought I was there because I was dressed in camouflage, all camos, like survivalist outfit is all I own. And so I looked like a poacher, and I did not know at that time that anyone with the guts to squat federal land and grow marijuana in a state that it's legal is more than likely a very bad actor, like Mexican cartel connected kind of individual. So I had no idea that was an attractive thing going on in the wilderness there. So before the 10 days, I had a run in and a big time fear of bodily harm experience. And so part of the 10 days without food ended up becoming a great way to stay hidden. I had no fire, and all I did, and I was very satiated by live water.
It's a great story, and we'll save the long form of it for maybe a future podcast, but these were not your crunchy Humboldt hippies in the woods. These were some bad hombres. No, but to go back to the spirituality of fasting, and you talked about the two probably most known examples of fasting in the Bible. First, in the Old Testament, you have Moses, who I think on 2 separate occasions is instructed to fast for 40 days and 40 nights. He's given this revelation from God in order to prepare him for an encounter with God. No one has ever seen God up until this point, and Moses gets the privilege of seeing at least the back of God's head on Mount Horeb after 40 days and 40 nights. And there's all kinds of interesting interpretations about what could have been going on there. But I think you're speaking to the idea of that in our everyday state, when we're so caught up with the mundane aspects of where our next meal is going to come from, we can't access certain states of consciousness, and that makes us less prepared for a really transformative revelation that might be waiting for us. So I think that this is an opportunity to try to go deeper, but I also am embedding in the DNA of the Benedict Challenge a certain self-limitation, or at least making sure that I'm not pushing myself beyond my limits, because I think that there is a danger of pride, namely there's also potentially medical dangers if you're in poor health, or something could happen, and I don't want to be liable for that if other people are experimenting. So I'm not challenging people to go and do a full 40-day fast, even though for a lot of people we don't realize that we can do that perfectly safely. We'll die sooner without getting sleep than we will of not eating, and we do need some water to survive. But you look to these feats of 40 days and 40 nights, whether it's Jesus in the wilderness or Moses on Mount Horeb, and you wonder, have we lost some sort of a strength? This was the question that the Benedictine monk Adalbert de Vogüé asked when his monastery basically said, "Oh, fasting, we don't do that anymore." People said that we just weren't as strong as we used to be as the holy men and women of previous times. And he pushed back against that, and through this adoption of one meal a day and trying it out for himself, he finds that not only was it eminently doable, but that it was actually a downright joy. and he experienced not fasting as more difficult than fasting when he had to eat with his community on Sundays, the sort of dispensation that he gave himself in order to belong to the community more fully. He felt that he was just sluggish the rest of the day and couldn't pray with as much fervor as he could before. So we have to be attentive to how we're structuring our own fasts. And the rule of St. Benedict gives us certain guidelines. But what I want to do for the remainder of this conversation is come up with a working template which will be adaptable as we go through this. And it's the same thing that I'll be giving people the resources to do on their own. Coming up with your schedule, it might be the strict observance of one meal a day, at least 6 days a week, excluding Sundays. Or you might do a variant where you do 2 meals a day sometimes, which is also rooted in the rule of St. Benedict. Most days, I believe, were actually 2-meal days where the first meal was taken around noon and then the second meal at 6 p.m. But there's endless variations. People who have done research into fasting will find that there's basically every combination you can imagine. I've seen the 20 hours fasting, 4 hours of eating. There's 16-8. There's the fast 5, which would be 19-5. And then there's just you could even say that if you make it from dinner the night before to breakfast and you fast for 12 hours, that's a certain kind of fast. That's why we call it breakfast, break the fast.
So before we move into the template, it's a great point. I do want to call out our Abrahamic brothers and sisters of Islam. They do it during Ramadan, a 40-day fast every year. And they don't even drink water and during the daylight hours, and then they have potentially a 1 meal a day thing going on for them as well. So this is a mystical practice that is practiced by 1 billion people on the planet, and 1 billion people who believe in the same monotheistic God we believe in. And I just wanted to shout that out before we continue.
And that's actually anticipating the video for day 1, which I just finished recording, and I do talk a little bit about that. I'm not deeply familiar with the Ramadan practices, but I know that they don't eat until sundown, so you get kind of an eating window between sundown and when you go to bed. And it's also a time for community. So I think this is a beautiful thing that I want to try to adopt here. We're down on the dock, J Dock in Berkeley, and we're going to have some fish fries. You can better believe that on Fridays, those days when Catholics abstain from meat, we're going to be frying up some fish, maybe some crabs, and if the pickings are scarce, we'll just crack open a couple cans of oysters and eat them down here on the dock. So getting to the template, Ash Wednesday, since we are doing this to coincide with Lent, it's by no means limited. You can start the challenge at any point, but Ash Wednesday is one of the few remaining days when the Catholic Church still observes a fasting practice. I think that it's true that actually, Muslims probably as a community or as a religious tradition have maintained a fasting tradition better than really any other religion, maybe with the exception of Eastern Orthodox, which also still maintains a robust fasting tradition, not only during Lent, but also during Advent and several other days. And the focus in Orthodox religion is on abstinence primarily. It gets stricter as Lent goes on, where first you cut out meat, then you cut out dairy and oils. So by the end of Lent, it's as it's very, very strict. And people can do this if they choose. I think that the beauty of the Benedict challenge and the rule of St. Benedict as a template is one that it's kind of uniquely Catholic. St. Benedict is associated with Western monasticism, and because Catholics don't really have a continuous tradition like the Orthodox do of this abstinence fasting, I'm embracing 1 meal a day as the standard template without adding any other mandatory forms of abstinence. And of course, mandatory is relative because none of this is mandatory. But when we say that we're following a rule, it just means that we're delegating a little portion of our free will to some other authority. And in this case, the authority is St. Benedict. We're under his tutelage, and we're going to pray for his intercession to make it through. The other point about rules versus just kind of winging it is a point that Roy Baumeister makes, and he's the secular guru on willpower, and he finds that when you can delegate some of your decision making to an external authority, it conserves that precious willpower. When we have to make all these decisions throughout the day, we get more fatigued. You might have heard of decision fatigue. So if we set our rule and we're really clear about our intention at the beginning, it'll be a lot easier to keep the habit. Counterintuitively, kind of like how it's easier to actually go without food altogether than to eat a small amount of calories.
Great call. There's one other spiritual piece of context I wanted to fold in before we moved into the template as well. Is, Christ walked around removing demons from his followers and from people that came into his contact. And his followers, the 12 in particular, also incorporated fasting as a way to be good at this process. It's challenging today because I don't know if the Catholic Church even recognizes demons really, and it's a weird thing to talk about. But I'm purposely doing this as a way to strike out the bad aspects of myself, to cast them aside the way Christ has taught, and that's the main goal. Maybe with grace, I could also potentially cast out demons on a larger scale socially, but it has to start within.
I'm thinking back to a time, it was a very pivotal moment in our relationship when we were kayaking from the aquatic park in San Francisco out to Alcatraz, and somehow, I don't remember why this was, but the conversation turned to this sort of spiritual warfare and the idea of actually being able to cast out demons. And my question was, like, how do we actually feel like we have the authority to do that? How do we get to that place? Because I didn't feel like I had that authority. And I think very few people, even those who might consider themselves devout, really feel that. I do actually know the exorcist of the Diocese of Oakland. And you wouldn't know it just by knowing him. I mean, he does have a sort of stern persona, but certainly spiritual warfare is alive and well, whether you acknowledge it or not. It's happening all around us, and we need to be equipped with the tools, prayer and fasting. I think it's I'm not sure which gospel, but the disciples are first given authority to go out and preach the kingdom and cast out demons, but they start coming back to Jesus wondering why they're unable to do it in these certain circumstances. And he replies, some of these cannot come out except through prayer and fasting. So I'm glad you bring that up. And it also gets to a point that underlies, even before you get to your template, if you don't have clarity of purpose, clarity of the what is really beside the point. So you have a very strong why, and that would be my first homework assignment for people taking the Benedict challenge, is consider, why are you doing this? Spiritual warfare, casting out your own demons. Maybe it's to break a particular addiction, and you could couple that if you are abstaining from that for the 40 days. It's a great period of time to cement a new habit. But it could also be praying for someone else and for some sort of intention, for a remission of disease. Maybe it's for a remission of COVID-19 in the general population. I know that's one thing that I'm certainly praying for, because I was happy to see today that I think cases are already falling in the United States, whether that's for seasonal reasons or maybe the vaccine is making a difference. But as believers, I think part of that is to believe that spiritual matters and physical matters can't be neatly separated into these two compartments. And so the bodily aspect of faith can include a spiritual goal of, I think that weight loss is sometimes seen as an entirely shallow endeavor, but I want to be focusing on restoring our relationship to our bodies, including the vital organ of our body fat. It's an endocrine organ. And so a lot of this course is actually going to focus on the science behind our fat, because it's a really fascinating organ. And we don't want to demonize it, nor do we want to glorify it and say that all fat is good. because there are certain forms of fat, both that we eat and that we can put on our bodies, that that can be harmful to our other goals. How does that sound?
Sounds great, Charlie. Yeah, I'm definitely trying not to demonize the fat around my belly, but I am excited about getting rid of it for sure.
And changing the composition, because I'm a big proponent of cold exposure as well, which can actually increase adipose tissue, but the brown adipose tissue, which takes on that darker color because it's rich in mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cells. So we're going to be giving our fat cells and our at the cellular level, we're going to be giving our body a cellular workout. And even at the subcellular level, I don't know if the spiritual is subcellular, if it's transcellular, or it's beyond in some ways. But okay, are we ready to dive into actually creating our own rule here?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so for starters, we've got 40 days excluding Sundays, starting tomorrow and lasting through April 3rd. That's about, how many weeks is that? It's about 6 weeks, I think, where we'll need to have a plan, and it can be a static plan or a dynamic plan. And I think that the starting template might not be the one that you follow through to the very end, but the closer you can come to approximating it, the easier it's going to be to keep to it. Now, before we started this call, I was debating, and I mentioned that there's this option to do 2 meals a day. What do you think of that?
I'm going to go 1 meal a day, and except for the feast day of Sunday, just because I'm committed to, a practice of asceticism. I've already removed alcohol and marijuana from my life. Marijuana this year, alcohol last 100 days of last year, and I feel better. I feel more in control, and I do like the rigidity of a innovative container just for a short period of time. So.
And in doing so, you have already influenced me where I was a little bit on the fence. This morning I went to my Muay Thai class, which is Tuesdays and Thursdays, and sometimes I think, after Muay Thai I've kind of, earned a meal or something like that. But incidentally, this is the exact kind of thinking that I talk about in Hormetics as the perverse cycle. It's the vicious cycle of kind of treating exercise and food as linked in this way that they really aren't, either from a physiological perspective, but also I think that we can kind of get trapped in thinking, I ate some food that was bad for me, I'll just exercise it off. When in fact, we should always be striving to find the most nutritious foods and nutritious movements up to the point where we're not being neurotic about it. So if you're curious about my overarching philosophy of diet and exercise, you can read Hormetics, although I'm also going to be providing resources for making this transition, this switchover from not being accustomed to fasting regularly, just a little bit easier. Because it's 1 meal a day, I'll be honest, it's hard enough as it is. So I'm inspired. Thank you for inspiring me to do true 1 meal a day. This is something that Adalbert de Vogüé adopted and followed for the rest of his life. So it's certainly possible. I think that I'll probably settle into a different routine that involves a little bit more variation and randomness after the 40 days, because there can be certain benefits from keeping your body guessing and switching it up. Sometimes doing an even longer fast, 32 hours, 48 hours, or a spiritual fast of 5 days, 40 days like you've done. But within a span of 40 days, I think the consistency can outweigh the marginal benefit of getting a little bit of extra benefit from food after exercise or something like that. So I guess one question for you would be: do you have certain activities in your week that you'll want to be mindful of in terms of tomorrow, for example, Ash Wednesday? I think it's a day that a lot of people who observe it experience as sort of humbling and soul afflicting. And so you might not want to plan your power meeting or something like that. Do you have anything like that coming up that you're mindful of?
I don't think so. What I am going to do is, unlike you, I'm less active than you, and so part of this fast is going to be to decrease food intake, but also increase activity. So that might be a little difficult for the system at maybe the first week, but I think it's going to yield greater benefits. And I might also include some cold immersion. And then secondly, I am going to keep coffee and tea, just so that I can be functioning in the daytime and effective for my money-making clients, and then, switch it out in the evening time, so I won't be just water fast. I'm going to allow that break, I guess.
Right on. And you again you're leading me in this conversation, because that's really, I think, the next big question after you decide whether you're doing one meal a day every day or alternating days and maybe doing either 2 or 3 meals a day on certain days. I do think that if you're going to do one meal a day just a few days a week, for those of you out there who are trying to plan out your own session, Wednesdays and Fridays, those are the traditional days. If you want to add in another day, maybe Monday, just to stagger it. And then remember that you're keeping Sunday as a kind of a free feast day. So keep that in mind. But build your template around those general landmarks. So, beverages and coffee. I'm a caffeine drinker. I've had periods where I've gone without caffeine, but I'm with you in thinking that it might be a little bit much to try to. I think that could be a form of pride for me to try to go completely without caffeine. I have struggled with coffee a lot, and I find that sometimes I do better with just tea. And this is where coming up with a rule is always a challenge, because as soon as I set the rule, I'm automatically looking for the exception. So if I say, well, I'll let myself drink coffee on this day and that day, or at this time of day, I've sort of already lost the battle in a way. And I'm wondering if maybe, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I consider you kind of a counselor. Knowing me, not knowing my full caffeine history, do you think that this might be a good time for me to go without coffee, given that I've struggled with it a lot in the past?
Yeah, I think because you're in great shape, you know what I mean, and your body's working really on some of its on its peak performance already. So if you can do it and it doesn't lead to a negative impact of your performance in life, then go for it. But like you said, as long as it's not just a prideful thing. For me, I am going to keep 1 cup of coffee a day, no more than that, and 1 cup of tea. So just so that there is a very clear-cut rule, and I probably won't do it on maybe weekends. I only need it for days I'm working, and then I'm going to go no sugar all day except for the Sundays. Then I'll give myself some treats on Sunday. But
Excellent. I know my wife has already committed to no dessert for Lent. That's one of her abstinence components, and so I'm going to go along with that one. Sundays accepted again. Now there's this other question. Now that we've kind of covered beverages, and you mentioned you're not drinking, I'm also going to challenge myself. This is a challenge, but it's also something that I know from the past that I can do, which is to give up alcohol for this period. Not easy. I'm saying that, it's
sure.
These things are habit forming, right?
Social.
And
you
social.
hang out next door to Sulo, and you have wine in the background for dinner available all the time. Yeah, that's difficult.
So we're going to put that in the maybe category. Again, we don't, and it is modifiable, but trying to stick to what we decide once we decide it. This question of 4-legged animals is very archaic framing, but that was one of the things that monks of the Benedictine order abstained from. And that would include pork and cattle, I guess also lamb, goats. These aren't so common anymore. I mean, I eat lamb maybe a handful of times a year, but for me, the big one is beef. I love beef. My wife and I bought a half a cow recently, and we've got, frozen cuts of meat and just the ground beef. I eat it raw, to be honest. I love just little bits of raw beef. And it's also one of the most nutritious foods out there, It's rich in iron, vitamin B, B12, and so I was conflicted about this. But I think I'm leaning towards, for the spirit of the Benedict challenge, and since that was one of the things that he talked about abstaining from, and also since I'm not abstaining from meat in general, or dairy, or eggs, I think that this is one thing that I can go without, so that when I come out on the other end of the 40 days, I can start eating beef really regularly again with a newfound sense of appreciation. Now, this is another thing where it's entirely up to you. What's going to be your approach on meat, dairy, eggs, etc.?
That's a really good challenge. I hadn't thought of that. You know what I mean? I'm a big regenerative agricultural activist, as we've talked about in Swam Floor. So I would never think of giving up beef at this time. If anything, I'd say only grass-fed regenerative beef, nothing contained animal feedlot operation style. And then, same thing with eggs and everything. Yeah, I think that would feel best for me, is to be on as regenerative a diet as possible would be the parameters.
I love it. I'm tempted. Maybe I'll do that. Only regenerative beef too. But it's not about what you can get away with. It's about what you can discipline yourself to deny for a time so that you can experience it with more joy later. And I think in my case, the one reason I'm leaning towards giving up beef is I think I've started to take it for granted. Because we've had it in such abundance with this half a cow, I've at times started to think, and this is a horrific thought, but I've been a little bit sick of it at times. And so I want to restore it to that status as a really sort of choice main course in the meals. Now this gets to some other really kind of brass tacks considerations about meal preparation, and I plan to provide a template for simple meals that people can make that are nutrient dense, that will give them enough protein and enough fat to make it to the next day a little more easily. And I'm following loosely a book and a philosophy of nutrition that was pioneered by Weston A. Price. The book is called Nourishing Traditions, and so I call it Nourishing OMAD, or NOMAD for short. It's a little bit of a double entendre there, because it's, again, reframing our relationship to both dietary fat and body fat. Body fat being a vital adaptation for our ancestors, who often were nomads, and they would travel long distances without having a secure food supply. So that's when they had to lean on their own stores on their body. And I'll be talking about this more in the presentations, but we have a lot, most people have upwards of 50,000 calories stored on their body as fat, and then another 70,000 or so as proteins. Some of those proteins are vital proteins, and if you get so low on fat that your body starts to cannibalize its vital proteins, that's when you get into starvation. We can imagine that probably at the end of 40 days, Jesus was probably starting to get into that territory. And people who go on these heroic fasts often do experience that. But you also have people who are morbidly obese who fast for a year or more, and they get into that ketogenic mode where they're burning their own body fat, and you can survive on that. So interesting tidbit. But I guess there's always this question when you're writing a list of preparations. I'm not trying to make a cookbook, because that's a little too intensive of an effort. But I also don't think people are looking for a cookbook. I think we have cookbook fatigue. These, especially, the online recipes that you read, you've got to sift through all these pop-ups and ads, and they're telling you the story about their grandma, and it's like, okay, just tell me, what are the ingredients? And so my version of the preparations is basically kind of your shopping list, your ingredients, how to put them together. What kind of cooking equipment do you use, just to get a sense for like limitations? Because I know that people will be coming with different things stocked in their kitchen. What do you have access to? What do you like cooking with?
Well, I do have an undergrad from Culinary Institute of America, so I like to cook, but I don't have an oven because I stay most of the time on a vessel. So I have like a a water heated kind of like pot, I guess, and then kind of like an advanced rice cooker that you can also stew in, and a cast iron pan and a gas stove. So that's all I have.
Perfect. That sounds like I'm going to keep that in mind. That's going to be my sort of only assumption is that you have something like that, something for boiling water, preparing things in a kind of rice cooker type of thing, and then roast or pan frying. I might also include a few things for roasting vegetables, but there'll be things that can also be cooked in a pan. And I have a whole philosophy. It's up to everyone to kind of come up with their own philosophy and cooking style, but there are certain principles that I think are really beneficial for everyone, such as maintaining a pantry with a lot of good healthy fats. Coconut oil, butter, olive oil are the main ones. When it comes to salads, using your salad as the opportunity rather, we tend to snack throughout the day. I love nuts, I love seeds as a snack, but cheese is another good snack. If you can load all that stuff into one, excuse the language, big ass salad. That's Mark Sisson, the Primal Blueprints term for these nutrient dense, flavorful, delicious salads. Awesome. Loading up that cheese, oil, nuts, seeds, and other toppings and spices gives you that sense of satiety, where if you ate those things in isolation, you might be, if I eat a handful of nuts, what do I want? Another handful of nuts. Sure. If I eat a small handful of nuts in a salad, then I'm full. So that's one principle, but I don't want to give away the whole thing right now.
I love that idea. That's inspiring.
Another question that I have is has to do with your systems for tracking or kind of, I've been taking down some notes, actually mostly about your fasting rule, not my fasting rule, so I can share this with you. But if I were to create some resources for people, one thing I had in mind was a calendar template where there's the standard format for calendars. I think it's .cal or .ical or something. And can you see yourself benefiting from having on your calendar, like, this is the time when my fast ends, this is the time when my fast begins, this is the time when I'm going to have my cup of tea and coffee? Or do you flow more naturally? Can you kind of just keep it all in your head?
The one meal a day, I think I could benefit from a one set time for that one meal a day. I don't know if I want to plan all 40 days of the meals, And I think it would be nice to see on my calendar feast day when it's like feast. It's like, that's an exciting opportunity. And then, the coffee and tea, I think that would be a little too rigid for me. Just because I go by feel, but during the day, and I only have that one each. So I usually don't feel addicted to caffeine by any means. I just get the little boost from it. So.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And the other thing that we didn't talk about with respect to the one meal a day is kind of the end of the eating window. I have a problem when I make it to my eating window of keeping it in the realm of just a couple of hours. I'll often end up eating close to bedtime, which can affect your sleep. It actually sort of compresses the organs in your chest and makes it harder to breathe. So that's one way that it affects sleep quality, but there are others. And so the ideal for me is going to be 23 hours of fasting, 1 hour of eating, maybe 2 hours of eating, but probably I think I want to cap it at 7:30 so I get a good solid 2.5, 3 hours between my meal and going to bed. And I think I would benefit from having 2 alarms on my phone. One is the end of the fast, and the other is the beginning of the fast, 1 hour later.
Excellent.
There is an app for this, actually, which I'll include the link to in the show notes. And I think that could be a nice little additional bit of encouragement. And it might be more flexible than a calendar for most people if they can download the app rather than have constant notifications clogging up their calendar.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily do the alarm on the phone and the 23-hour a stop time to eating. I could see that being an issue. You know what I mean? Is I don't want to stop once I start. So, good call.
Have you ever, especially since you mentioned that you want to do more exercise, protein requirements for an active person, it can be hard to sometimes reach that threshold. And one way that I've found at the end of the day to get just a little bit more good, solid nutrition without just cooking a bigger meal, which can get a little bit monotonous if it's just a big plate of chicken breast or something like that, is something that's I've seen referred to on Twitter as slunking eggs. And it sounds disgusting, but if you've never tried this, I recommend it. It's actually delicious. You do need an immersion blender or those stick blenders, but you take a scoop of protein powder. You can get it with no sugar, and then you crack like 3 to 6 eggs in, and a little bit of milk, and maybe some frozen berries or half a banana. You mix that up. It's actually surprisingly good.
I appreciate that boldness, and I'm going to pass.
Good to know. That's why I beta test these ideas on you. We're just spitballing here, right?
Love it.
Okay, so that's a no on the slunking eggs.
For me,
all right,
does
right.
That mean it can't be included in the package?
No,
right?
it's true. But I will say that eggs, as a general supplement, to have plenty of eggs around, they're one of the most cost-effective forms of fat and animal protein. So that I might just have a special guide directly on how to use eggs creatively. If you get tired of just cooking them or scrambling them. So we've covered most of what I wanted to talk about, but there is still the idea of how what amount of structure do we want to add to the spiritual reading and the prayer component, which I think people might have their own very personal and private methods of prayer, but I know that I can benefit from a little bit of extra discipline and expectation. A lot of people are beginning I think it's a 40-day novena or a kind of every day praying to Saint Joseph this 40 days. Pope Francis declared this like a year of consecration to Saint Joseph. And I've had a devotion to Saint Joseph in the past, and I think that could be beneficial. Of course, we're asking for intercession by Saint Benedict, meaning that we're asking him to kind of pray on our behalf for us. But we can also pick our own saint. We can pick our own spiritual reading. I do have a document of all of the passages in the Bible, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, that refer to fasting. So I might try to weave those into the videos and the lessons. But I wanted to get your thoughts on the right level of structure for prayer and spiritual reading. Do you set aside certain times, or do you plan to set aside certain times with alarms and say, I'm going to pray for this long? Or do you want to make it more organically woven into your day with just some kind of a broader plan to fast for about this long, or maybe no rule at all?
No, this is great. I was not thinking of this, though it is a spiritual experience. So I will commit to before bedtime having some a block of time for spiritual reading, and I may also incorporate a heretical book of the Gnostic texts, just because they do inspire me, and then also so prayer and spiritual reading for maybe 45 minutes to an hour before bed.
That's ambitious, but I admire it. And as long as you're keeping some of the canonical in there from time to time as well, then I won't argue with the Gnostics, the Gnostics. Gnaw on that for a little while. Gnaw on those canonical synoptic gospels, and the Gospel of John, which is a very strange and mystical book that I think I feel called to reread from time to time, and this might be one of those times where I make a more in-depth study of the Gospel of John. And in addition to that, I will also be digesting some of these readings directly about fasting because I'm trying to form more of a cohesive philosophy of fasting that's not secondhand. We have the secondhand account of Adalbert de Vogüé, another guy named Scott McKnight who wrote a great book called Fasting: The Ancient Practices. And then I read a third book recently on spiritual fasting by a sort of Baptist preacher who had done a number of long-term fasts. And that was also very interesting it was called The Power of Fasting, to think of fasting as something that really can work wonders in our lives when we go into it with the right mindset and when we treat it as a response to a grievous moment rather than something instrumental, something that we do as a means to get some benefit. Even though the benefits are part of our hope, they're part of our expectation, I think that subtle shift from doing X to get Y, to doing X in response to Z. And whatever your Z is, I am hoping that we'll form a little virtual community and also grow our in-person community here through the course of this, because we gotta stick tight in these interesting times that we're living in.
Thanks, Charlie. Definitely. And, I'll also incorporate the pieces of knowing thyself, and the body is thy temple, because I've been desecrating the bodily temple, and I'm really enjoying this opportunity to step into a time of holding myself accountable to purification.
Well said. Better than I could have said it myself. I was going to add as a closing note that as you create your own rule, I'm going to provide, I think, just maybe a Google Doc that people can copy and fill in for themselves all these different categories, from the timing of their meals to alternating or not, to caffeine, to what are you abstaining from, to what is the quality or regenerative or not quality of the food, to whether you're slonking eggs or not, to what your spiritual practices are. These are all things that you want to write down initially and then make adjustments as necessary and listen to your body. Like you said, the body is a temple, and we are gifted to have these incredible, I almost called it a machine, but it's a borderline sacrilege, so luckily I caught myself. And then the last thing, you talked about at the very beginning of this conversation, the bread which comes not from the grocery store, but the sort of I think the Bible uses the word epiousian, which means supersubstantial, and in the context of the Lord's Prayer, that would be, give us today our supersubstantial bread. Jesus also says, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. And so really staying in touch with that word wherever you find it most resonant, I think is the key. Epiousian is the code word, if you will, to unlocking the epigenetic benefits of
Love it. Yeah, no, the piece, you really did touch upon it, the idea that we can live off of not just bread alone. That's what's missing from our society today. And you mentioned COVID. COVID is a spiritual sickness as well as a physical ailment. And I really appreciate the thought of bringing in, mass wellness as a way of purifying self and praying for the betterment of the collective. I'm just really inspired by this. Thank you for putting this together.
Well, my inspiration, as the name of the challenge suggests, comes from St. Benedict, who I'm looking forward to learning more about, because he's sort of a pivotal figure, not only in the church, but really in the history of the West. You look at the monasteries and how they developed at the precise time when all knowledge and learning from the Roman Empire was being destroyed. Enough of it was preserved in the monasteries to eventually kind of plant the seeds, I think, for the revival that took place later on. And so we have St. Benedict to thank, and hopefully we're not headed for another kind of collapse. But if we are, then hopefully enough of us will be ready to jump into gear and form the communities that can actually preserve that knowledge and preserve a kind of virtuous living while the barbarians pillage and plunder what's left of this suburban dystopia that we call. Well, anyway, thanks for listening, everyone out there. This is the Benedict Challenge podcast, and I'm extremely grateful to have my buddy Jon joining me as the first person to sign up. And if you are wanting to learn more and go deeper, make sure you go to unnaturalmethod.com/Benedict, and that will have the link to the course materials, which I did want to ask you this one last thing. I've got a little bit of a guilty conscience about the potential sin of simony, which is buying and selling of spiritual things. I am offering this course for free on YouTube if you watch the daily videos, but I'm also putting it up on Gumroad if you want access to the full course at a time for $20. Simony or not?
Oh, that's a great question. You know what I mean? Like, are we merchants in the temple by spreading this? We have to be compensated in some way for our work, and in the past, if we were spiritual teachers, we were compensated through the institution. So I think that it's not simony to stay on the, especially at the $20 level. It's very approachable, firstly, and then secondly, the other piece is I would love to come back and talk about my experience on the feast days of Sundays, because I am also a little nervous about breaking the rule of talking about fasting. You know what I mean? Because we're not supposed to do that, and I do take that pretty literal.
Two things on that. First of all, I just had an idea, which is that if you want this material in one place, I will gladly give you a coupon code to get it for free. Anyone who wants it can get it for free. The price is, in a sense, it's pay what you want. $20 is the sort of default, but you're more than welcome to reach out to me by email, chdiced@gmail.com. And will gladly give away the course for free. And then as to the point about not proclaiming your fast, as we're instructed not to do in no uncertain terms in the Gospels, I borrow from Adalbert de Vogüé, who in his book To Love Fasting addresses this paradox basically by saying that the decline of a vital fasting tradition is a topic that requires some attention. And I think we can do this without going around and telling people that we're fasting, but within the context of a virtual community, we can share our experiences, and we can even, I think that there is a lot of learning that needs to take place to get back to the place that was the default understanding of people in a previous era. So that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it.
I appreciate that. And then the other piece is we need to become more resilient as human beings. And I get it. We don't know how to do that. And there's I remember when I went into the woods, how much fear there was for my family. They're like, you're going to go that extended amount of time without eating. You might die, And so definitely make sure people follow advice of whatever doctors they follow and not be too prideful. But at the end, sharing wisdom is a fine line. And I'm looking forward to figuring that out with you.
Likewise, and know thyself is the good closing note. So we'll leave it there, and I look forward to checking in. Maybe we can do this again next week.